Okay, dear ladies and gentlemen, we're back again. It's hopefully you had all a good, nice lunchtime and something nice to eat. We start now with the third key activity which we would like to present to you about our Altbau approach, which is the activation and supporting of potential buyers and investors. If we might have some newcomers who have not joined our morning sessions, I will start with a brief introduction about the goal and the task of activating some potential buyers and investors. This then will be followed by three practice examples from our participating cities in our Altbau network. And then afterwards, you have the opportunity to meet these cities at virtual tables and ask them any questions which you might have concerning their approach and their experience. Also, all the information you can find in our Altbau guidebook and even more information than you get presented today. So if you're interested, please take a look at the website now you just see here in the slide, and there you can download the Altbau guidebook and also other documents which we have prepared as outputs and of our Altbau network. So let's start with activating and supporting potential buyers and investors. Well, what most often is the case that municipalities do not have the right tools, or they do not have sufficient financial capacities to renovate such like vacant and derelict buildings by themselves, or that they can support via funding programs and the owners in that attempt. So therefore, investors who are willing to invest in these buildings, also hopefully in the interest of the urban development goals of your city, are a very important player in the reactivation of vacant buildings. But unfortunately, these investors are not easy to find, and this is a problem we all share. So the goal is, in particular for this activity, to draw the attention of the right potential investors and users to your vacant buildings, and then to support them in the buying, but also, of course, then in the rehabilitation process. So task what you should follow within this activity is, first of all, you should try to clarify what kind of investors you're looking for in your city. Then you should prepare information which these investors might be interested in, and of course you should identify and contact them, these investors. And last but not least, you support the investor in the process of acquiring a vacant building. So when you think of investors, one often thinks of these large anonymous companies or project developers. But when you really think about investors, in fact, there are various investor types. And you can see here a couple of or three main investor types here on the right side. And what's important is that each of these investors brings a different strengths, but also certain weaknesses. So for particular buildings, they might be more fitting to reactivate than for other ones. So therefore, it is important to identify which investors are well suited for the reactivation of your vacant buildings. So, and we have more or less identified three main types. The first one is owner occupiers, which are, for example, private single investors who also would like to live in the building they are renovating, or for example co-housing groups which as a group try to get hold of the building and then together renovate it and live in these buildings. Or you might also be interested in, for example, young families which try to seek home ownership. So for them might be also interesting to check for a vacant building which they can then renovate for their needs. Others could be also former inhabitants which come back to the city and might also look for ownership. So these could be like owner occupiers which then occupy the house which they are renovating. Then the second group are renters and landlords. Here again, you can have private owners which really look for an investment which they would like to take, and financial companies. So this can be real estate funds and banks which are investing in the housing estate. Could be, of course, housing companies, could be profit-driven one, but also profit-driven. Of course, also housing corporations could be an investor type you could look for, but there are also social organizations and there are foundations outside which also provide housing. So these could be also investors you can look for. And the third investor type is the investors who are selling the building right after they have rehabilitated the building. So these often are project-driven project developers and also financial companies. And to be able to determine the fitting investor, it's helpful to be clear about the following aspects. And the first one is you should really know what is your vacant building portfolio. So which type of vacant buildings do you have which are for sale? What is their size? What is the general condition? And then you can check which investor types fits well. For example, when you have a large building which needs a lot of investment, then most probably if you look for a private single investor, it won't work because he is not financially capable of it, or he's not experienced in dealing with such difficult buildings. So here, more profit-driven project developers with experience, with some financial backgrounds, most probably fit better and can easier rehabilitate and reactivate such a vacant building. Also, you could check what are your development priorities maybe in the neighborhood in which you have these vacant buildings. For example, you can check what kind of housing space do you want to have developed. Is it more high standard housing to attract skilled workers, or are you looking more for affordable housing, or do you want more have like self-user group housing, or do you rather prefer housing or more housing for ownership? So you can have maybe different goals within this neighborhood. So based on this, you can also check who fits well. So as example, when you look for ownership housing, then of course your owner occupiers. Or if you look for affordable housing, most probably housing cooperatives or non-profit housing companies are more suited to that. So also depending on your development goals, which you might have on the city level or on the neighborhood level, you might look for different investor types. And of course, also a third one is the demand in your local real estate and also in the housing market. So what kind of flats, sizes, qualities are on the market? You can check which investor can provide this kind of housing best. Also, you can check what are the sales and rental prices. So when there might be higher profits, and also more professional investors are interested when they're rather lower rents or sale prices, then maybe more people like smaller investors are interested in that. So these are more or less three different things you can determine what is your situation in your municipality, and then you can check, okay, which investor type would fit best to these situations. And when you know which investor type, or for sure you will find not only one investor type which is fitting to your vacant building portfolio, you aim for then prepare information these investors might be interested in, and that might grasp the interest in the vacant building in question. So relevant information could be for sure about the real estate market. So what are demands? What are rent prices? What are sales prices? So these investors could be interested in. Of course, they are interested in the vacant buildings on sale. So provide building information sheets, for example, with the price, with the size of the building, the condition of the building, or even as Saran explained, that you've made a building diagnosis. This could be helpful. Yeah. Another information you can provide is the potential of these vacant buildings based on the interest of the investor, also of the market. What can we achieve? And another information you can provide is about the neighborhood. For example, when you rather for young families, you can provide information which are relevant for young families, as for example, their playgrounds around or close to the vacant building in question, or their primary school. So what kind of facilities are there in the neighborhood, which is relevant for these investors. And of course, also interesting information for investors always are what are financial incentives. Are there any tax incentives in your municipality? Are there any funding programs which you might can use, or any grants which they can get? So this kind of information would be relevant to get together and use at a certain moment, and when you're in contact with your or the potential investors. So the The problem with investors, unlike owners, investors are often not directly known as individuals or in individual companies at the very beginning. And if this is the case, ask in your circle and your colleagues and other people for recommendations for suitable investors. Maybe they know someone who is active and could fit to the investor type you're looking for. You can also conduct research to find out which suitable investors exist. For example, which kind of investors are active in your region or maybe already in your city, and who's looking for corresponding opportunities based on the vacant buildings which are on sale in your city. But also very important is to draw attention to these vacant buildings in your portfolio. This could be done as Riga does with their community mapping, but there are also other activities which you can do, like PR activities, or you can use multipliers, or you can even organize events. For example, you can use relevant groups in social media. You can also use professional real estate portals to inform about these vacant buildings. You can also join housing and real estate fairs. You can have an information stand there, and there often you find investors and you can get in touch with them. You can also write articles in owner association or real estate magazines, or you can inform about these buildings in local newspapers. Another thing what you can do is also to put like a large banner on the vacant building and saying like, I'm on sale, who wants me, or I provide these opportunities for you. And you can also organize tours to vacant buildings on sale. So you invite people to follow you to these vacant buildings and take a look at them straight. So these are some ideas, and of course these and more proposals you will find also in our Altbau guidebook. So as most probably at the very beginning, investors, when you're not so well-known, investors will not straight contact you. So as with owners, contact these investors you identify proactively and send them personal letters, call them. So in general, try to communicate always in an investor language and always try to be as professional as possible, because this is very important when you talk to investors. So when you have gained the interest of an investor in one of the vacant buildings on sale, of course you should support them. Investors receive, of course, the same support as owners, which we explained in the earlier session, as soon as they become an owner. But also you can provide certain services for them before they are becoming an owner. And also here on the right-hand side, you see some services you can provide, and as already mentioned, you can provide information, suggestions about vacant buildings for sale, which would fit their interest. You can organize personal site visits with them to vacant buildings they might be interested or think they could be interested in. You provide them then first-hand information about funding opportunities. You can start to connect him with the owner of a vacant building or with other people from the city administration to discuss his idea what he would like to do in this neighborhood and with this building. Or you can also make contact to grant and financial institutions. So making all these contacts so the investor knows to whom to talk to and maybe get first-hand information before he will buy then the building. You can also provide guidance through the purchase procedure, because also not every investor is familiar how this works. So this could be very helpful, in particular, for example, when you work with co-housing groups. And yeah, in general, provide information on legal and administrative procedures. So far, we have not so much, let's say, experience with owner-occupiers and co-housing groups, which were investing in such buildings, but some information or experience we have. So what is very important, particularly with co-housing groups, that they need particular support in getting organized and getting funding. So if this is like a target group on which you would like that they will, start rehabilitating your vacant buildings, and you look for co-housing groups for that, really try to get this kind of support, how to get organized and how to get funding. So in this way also provide advice on financial and legal possibilities. And also, if you know some other good example, for example, from another co-housing group, try to contact them with these other good examples so they can learn firsthand also from people who already have done it. Well, this already as first introduction to this activity. And now we will come to our 3 examples which we'll present to you. Chemnitz will present their methods, their experiences and lessons learned with working with investors. Then we have a presentation from Vilafranca, from the city. It will be from Habitat 3 Foundation, because they now collaborate with the city to hopefully become more strongly engaged to provide social housing, and for this they will use then these vacant buildings which are in Vilafranca. And third, we will have a presentation from Riga, which will tell about their approach of using socially temporary use as a co-development approach for large-scale illiquid properties. So as a reminder to all the presenters, you have 15 minutes. You know the rule with the bell. And to the audience, when you have any questions, please note them down, and later during the Meet the Coffee break, you can meet these cities at their tables and ask them any question you might have. So with this, I pass on the word to Martin Neubert.
Thank you very much, Niels. Thank you for the very good introduction again. I think it's important really to contextualize what we have learned and what we understand about the topic. Chemnitz, of course, has a pre-runner function in this network because we've got some more years of experience about the whole thing. And so, as in my previous presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about our experiences, some case studies as well, and some more in-depth knowledge that we gained over the years. Some of the knowledge was gained easily. In some cases, it was much more difficult and a longer process. One thing I might add at the beginning, as you can see on the picture here, the typology, the buildings that we're working with here in Chemnitz are predominantly those tenement buildings from the Gründerzeit era. Gründerzeit era is the 20-30 years before the First World War, which was Chemnitz boom time, and Chemnitz has a huge amount of these buildings. And they have a certain size. They are at least 500 square meters up to 1,200 square meters. So they are not one family houses like you've got in other cities even in other parties we are working with, where you've got a completely different typology. This also reflects on the potential investors and users for those buildings. So keep that in mind when we're talking about the Chemnitz experience. This is really focusing on this specific typology. Okay, what do investors want? In the ideal case, they want to renovate the building and then either keep it for self-use, either live in them themselves or rent out the remaining flats. Some are even developers who have a large portfolio of buildings that they have. They will keep it to rent it out. And then we've got a specific kind of investors, developers. They are renovating this and selling on the building, either completely or as separate flats. These are the investors that you can actually work with. There are also some others who only buy and invest in buildings to speculate there. So what can we offer? Basically, it's 2 things. One is to find a building for them, or to help them find a building, to connect them with owners so that a good match is found for the best of the building. And then we can coordinate and support the whole process from the negotiations point over the financing and planning phase, also all the way to the point where we connect them to the city administration, the different departments, for example. So for those that just wait and speculate for the buildings, we're trying to stay away. So we more or less cut them off. They are really not our focus group when we're talking about investors. So we cannot, for them, we cannot offer any further support. But also for normal investors, there's some kind of a limit. Like I also already talked with the owner groups, we are only a rather small project, so we cannot really go all the way and all very deep with additional funding, or for example, creating profiles or assessments, for example. Another thing is where we also have to be a little bit careful about that we don't bypass procedures. We also don't, for example, pass on owner contacts without the will of the owners. So we're trying to keep on the legal side as well, and also in a way that you're really able to negotiate with between the groups and work the best out of that. Okay. The main communication channels that we use have shown to be the project's website on the one hand, where we're showing our network, not our network, our project, where people can read and understand on what we're doing, also showing who we are, that we're on behalf of the city, and also because we're publishing buildings there. So every owner who says, yes, publish my building there, I'm all right with that, we go on and do that with a profile. In some specific cases, where that's really, where good results are expected, we're also publishing single buildings on real estate websites. That has really helped to broaden the group of investors, of visitors to the buildings, and to gain interest. But over the years, much more what has been best source actually of owner contact is the word of mouth recommendations, because there you are getting into contact directly with investors, the kind of investors that you actually want. So you can really target on finding them in this way. We also tried a few other things like newsletters, press releases, flyers, events, etc. This helped to supplement our efforts. But I think the top three that I mentioned there are the ones that are the most helpful ones. If you want to have a look at our website, there's the link. We will also write it in the chat in a moment if you just want to have a glance and a look at that. What we publish about the building is written in one of those one-pager building profiles. There, of course, it's shown how the building looks, where it's located, but also data on the building, sizes, for example, location, the general situation, the intentions of the owners, if he wants to sell or if he's got other plans, if there might be a foreclosure coming up, for example. But we're also showing up what the options are for development. For example, prospective use, demand structures, options for grants and subsidies, etc. So it's really more or less a two-way. Well, there are two main channels how people find our place. Either we wait for reactions to what we publish on our website or the real estate websites, or we specifically look for potential investors for a certain building. For example, if a building has a certain characteristic because it's located in a certain place, or it has a potential for a certain use, then we try to target specific investors with information on the building. So basically, you've got those two kinds of requests. One are building-specific requests, where people see a certain building and see, yes, this is a building that's of interest to me. Then we try to arrange as quickly as possible a site visit, or at least a talk here in the office, where we can really have a look on what's on what's possible. Or if the request is more general at the beginning, for example, they've seen, well, there's this project here, what do you have in stores? Then we're trying to meet first and try to understand who the investor is and what he wants to achieve. So it's more or less also kind of a filtering work we do, because many of the investors that are coming around are not the kind of investors that you want, because you kind of feel like they're speculators from the first moment, or you see that they are not really serious about the whole thing, or that they would not be capable of managing such a big building. So there's a chance really to filter and to take it further with those investors and users and buyers that are that are wanted in one way or another. Yeah, and from there on, we continue on the discussion, further information on the building. We contact the owner and try to connect them. We also try to connect with relevant stakeholders. Who these stakeholders are, we will have in a later presentation today. So, and there will actually be a sale of the building, a renovation, and finally the reuse, which is what we want to achieve. Yes. When communicating with investors, it's just like with the owners. You've got first and foremost aim the public interest to get the building from vacancy to use and from decay to renovation. So that's always has to be in the back of our mind. And then it's kind of comparable to how to communicate with owner. Be solution oriented, be transparent about what we're doing. Also be polite in the communication, but also be consequent. Like pushing forward promising contacts and opportunities, but also be free to drop dubious contacts. Because nothing's helped if you've got a new investor and the situation is worse than before. Last but not least, I will go through 3 case studies of investors that we had, just to give you an overview. The 3 are code named. If you're from Chemnitz, you might know who it is, who is behind that code name. But it's not the real name. So, for example, we've got Easy Limited. It's a large-scale urban development company which has been active in a nearby city before. And in 2018, they decided they would look into Chemnitz in search for buildings where they could invest. They were really professional developers. So in the first year, we had several site visits, a few purchases. At the beginning, we as an agency were a bit cautious because they were, for some reason, which was unclear at the beginning, also very much interested into buildings that were of particular bad shape. So we decided we would take it slow. We had to negotiate, so they had about 3 buildings at the beginning from us. But actually it worked out. They renovated the building and also in a good quality. So this formed the basis for further cooperation. And the past years, a very good cooperation actually evolved. Today they have 12 buildings in our focus areas. Some are still in progress, but some are also finished already. And so this has been a very fruitful cooperation. Also because they brought some professionality, which really helped to approach very difficult cases. For example, where you had a large group of heirs who jointly own the building, for example, or if the building has certain problems in the built structures, for example. So so this is a positive example. A less positive example is the next one, which I'm going to show here. Dr. B and Mr. H, Mr. Hyde, I think you get the idea behind that code name, who we also got in contact for the first time in 2014. We also visited different buildings, but for some reason this seemed strange. And unlike the previous company, it turned out that they were actually speculators, just buying the building and putting them online for double the price in the next day. So this was something that we really did not want. And we are very happy that we actually didn't connect them to any owner, and no sale happened in this case. So this was the end of our active contact. They have been active in Chemnitz ever since, and we're just monitoring more or less on what's going there, what's going on with the building. Yeah, so some communication was still possible, and we tried to have a look so the buildings won't fall into disrepair, but generally that was it with them. And the last is an example that also Niels referred to before, is one of those cooperative housing projects. I called it here La Strasbourgeoisie. It's a group of friends who decided we want to move out of our house and find a new house that we can renovate together, so we stay together. So we went through the process. We were looking for a building which looked right at the beginning, but in the end it didn't really work out. And so step by step, this group moved forward, learned more about what they wanted to do. And so we were able to connect them later on with our partner project, which is called Cooperative Housing Chemnitz, which helped them in their process on acquiring a building, now taking this project to the next level. The Cooperative Housing Chemnitz, just on the very last slide, is a project that runs parallel to our housing agency. While we are focusing mainly on the buildings and try to find solutions from the buildings, this cooperative housing project focuses on groups of individuals who want to share developing a building. So Roman Carbole is here today. If you want to take it further with him, today he might be available to talk. Maybe after the session he can join at the Chemnitz table. Yeah, so since 2018 they had different events in Chemnitz where they activated and brought together those groups. Yeah, and offered one-to-one consultations on financial and technical issues, and took some projects forward already. But this won't be the topic for now.
So now we'll come, let's say, to an investor to Habitat 3 Foundation who are investing in properties, and these most often, I think, kind of investor we look for, and because they also are very strongly socially aware of housing needs and try to provide in this way also housing which correspond to the social housing needs in cities. So in this way, I'm very happy that Xavier can inform us about his experience working in Vilafranca, but also somewhere else, as they work, I guess, all over Catalonia. Xavier, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting to this very interesting webinar. And I'm Xavier Mauri from Habitat 3 Foundation. And like you say, we are investors. And now I'm going to explain how we are and after what kind of things we are doing. We are an NGO that managing social housing in Catalonia. Our numbers, we are managing around 700 units where are living more than 2,000 people. So now I try. Okay. Now it's moving the presentation. First, I would like to explain some context about social housing in Catalonia. Catalonia currently has about 60,000 social housing units, which represent 2% of the total housing stock. The social housing sector is insufficient, especially when compared with other European countries, which have an average of 15%. Approximately 230,000 additional social housing units will be necessary to meet the current demand from citizens at risk of social and residential exclusion. On the other hand, in Catalonia, it's not very common that social organizations like Habitat 3 managing social housing. like in some parts of Europe. For example, 100% in Netherlands and Denmark, 54% in United Kingdom, housing associations, 50% in France HLM or by law socio, 40% in Austria by cooperatives, etc. Our mission, the mission of Habitat 3 Foundation, is to work with social organizations and public administrations to guarantee the right of decent and affordable housing to people in vulnerable situations. And we are working with 11 municipalities in Catalonia, like Barcelona and Vilafranca, usually to accommodate people who lost their homes by evictions. And we are working too with more than 30 social organizations, that these organizations offer accommodation and social support to different types of people, like homeless, housing first programs, mental illness, intellectual disability, refugees, women who suffer violence, etc. And now all houses that we are managing, and this is very important for us, for the people that is living in the houses, we guarantee social support for the tenants. This support can be done by Habitat 3 Foundation, municipalities in the projects that we are working in together with Vilafranca, the municipality give this support, or provide by other social organizations. In case of Habitat 3 Foundation, if we do, we give social support linked to houses in these areas, domestic economy and rent payments, house maintenance, good relation with community, supplies and energy poverty, and support in job replacement. And in this situation from the COVID, another thing that is appeared is about the connection, about internet and other things that give some problems for the people who live in our flats. And in summary, we offer affordable houses, social support for tenants, and always link it to community. And like you say, Niels, we are an investors, but we have different ways to find the houses for these programs that is explained before. And we look for housing units in the private market in collaboration with municipalities and real estate agents. We negotiate with the owners of vacant apartments, so they consider putting them to a social use. The recruitment of these houses can be done through lease or sale. In case of lease, this lease for not very long term, is in between 3 and 5 years. We offer to the owners secure lease, because we rent to them and after we rent again to the tenants. In this case, we offer 100% security. It's not connected with the second rent with the tenants. It's totally a relation between the owner and Habitat 3. Subsidies in case of houses is net of refurbishment. We offer 20% of the cost in subsidies. And financial help, in the same case, we offer a loan of 80% of the cost without interest. In this case, we deduct this loan every month of the rent we pay to the owners. And finally, we rent apartments in good conditions at the end of the lease. Agreements and financial support from city councils allow this program. In case of sale that we are doing in Vilafranca, we buy houses and buildings of apartments. Usually, we have to do some renovation in these flats that we saw in Chemnitz. We use loans and subsidies from regional government. And for example, we have both 2 apartments in Vilafranca, Penedès. These houses we are managing in collaboration with this municipality. After I will explain more things about Vilafranca. All these houses, requirement by lease or by sale, we offer to our partners, municipalities or social organizations. And always we offer accommodation to vulnerable people with social support. When necessary, normally it's almost always, we manage renovation works to guarantee the adequacy of the units of buildings. We perform all the activities in collaboration with work placement companies. These companies are non-profit organizations too. And in the last 5 years, we renovate more than 300 apartments. This renovation has a triple social impact: improve the cities, mobilizing empty apartments, increasing social housing market, and embed people at risk of social exclusion. And the future. Some examples of the next challenges for Habitat 3 Foundation. One project that we almost finished, a project of vacant building in need of refurbishment. We invested 800,000 euros to promote 17 apartments. We finished works last February, and now there are 34 people living there with social support from 5 social organizations and social services from Barcelona municipality. Home purchase that I explained before, we have both 120 units in the last 4 years, and we have a plan to buy between 50 and 100 units more every year in the next 3 years. And housing development. We are planning to develop 2 or 3 buildings every year in collaboration with municipalities. These developments can be new construction or refurbishment. We expect in 2022 start the first project. For example, in Vilafranca del Penedès, we are studying a rehabilitation of a building situated in historical district called Guitars Factory, and 12 apartments can be promoted. And people at risk of social and residential exclusion will be referred by City Council. In this case, the City Council of Vilafranca helps to us with some reports about the state of the building, about the contacts with the owners. It's like some of the things that you explained for Niels and Martin. This helps a lot in this case to us, for make a decision about the viability, the economical viability of the project. And another example is in Barcelona. We have an agreement with a private investor to promote a new building of 47 apartments. But Barcelona City Council offered the land, private investor to invest in construction of the building, and Habitat 3 Foundation will manage this building. We expect that works start next year. And finally, like a conclusion, our experience is that mobilizing empty houses and buildings to social market is too complex that with only one operator we cannot do alone. To try to solve situations need collaboration and networks of different actors, like public administrations in different levels, private owners and investors, and social organizations working together. We will be attentive about next generation European funds that we expect we will use for this purpose, especially for energy and renovation. In this case, our activities will have not a triple, a quadruple social impact: improve the cities, mobilizing empty apartments and buildings, increase social housing market, employ people at risk of social exclusion, and reduce energy consumption and be much more sustainable. Thank you very much for your attention. I will be in Vilafranca virtual table to speak with you and answer questions or doubts. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this, I think, is a very nice example, as Habitat 3 was not, let's say, in operation in Vilafranca, and through the project of the Altbau project, they came in touch with each other and now developed this kind of concept. So this is really try to look for also the investors, you as a city or whoever then is responsible for the reactivation of vacant buildings in your city. Really try to be clear with whom would you prefer to work on, and really try to look for these investors. And yeah, hopefully then you will find these. And now we come to our third example. Marcis, the floor is yours to present your approach in Riga, how you would try to reactivate your vacant buildings in Riga.
Perfect, yeah. Yeah, so basically, I was jealous listening to the example from Spain, because in some sense we are building a model similar to Habitat 3, but just more for more neoliberal context, economical context, where there are not so many, well, there are not such a tradition of social organizations developing space. And the asset that we are looking at, which is untapped, is that there are quite a lot of social temporary use organizations and social temporary use as an approach, which makes creative users and social users of space who want to want to grow their initiatives, their social and creative and cultural motivations, so to say, that they can become the investors together with citizens, so that people themselves, citizens themselves, can develop cities and more spaces so that cities become affordable, resilient, and creative. So that's maybe a bit different perspective on who is the resource. Users can be the resource. This is what I'm proposing. And I'll try to define what is social temporary use for those who don't know. Also, what are the urban commons? This reason why people want to put their resources into something as space, and then it becomes together as a pool of resource to make illiquid spaces into generative spaces. So this is one of the projects that we also started working 3 years ago, like typical illiquid space, which if to look at it conceptually, then these spaces are the ones where financial capital cannot find return to the investment. And various reasons, because, for example, this school that's also in Riga, it's an old abandoned school. It doesn't have the typology of rooms necessary for modern use of it. Perhaps it's in a neighborhood which is not so attractive, and the owner is not able to find a concept that would make this space alive again and return to use. But the resource that we are tapping, and we have observed in Riga since 2014-15, but which has been used more and more in all over Europe, is social and cultural capital. So to say, it's that a lot of cultural experiences show of reanimating abandoned spaces that culture and social motivations can see potential in vacant spaces that are not interesting in the property market and that don't give return to the property market, to the financial capital. They can give return to cultural and social motivations of people to create in the empty space something which they wouldn't be able to do in a rent situation. And social temporary use, or just temporary use, as a vacant property guardian model is a model since 1980s already, which has been finding and utilizing these cracks in the property market while the buildings are empty. So when they stop being used, and there is a waiting time and uncertainty till the new project is maybe coming, maybe it's not coming, maybe there's a crisis and economical shift like in Eastern Europe. It happened since 90s and still we feel this impact. There is a in-between time or meanwhile time, so to say, where property doesn't have a positive use. And property guardian service is basically this simple proposal to the owner that give the space for temporary use basically for free in exchange for a service of this property being guarded. It's looked after. Degradation and vandalism is prevented. Maintenance costs are usually covered. And in case of social temporary use, to define it a bit differently from ordinary, maybe anti-crack or vacant property guardian services for profit, like with for-profit motivation, social temporary use also gives or contributes with public benefits, which I'll explain a bit later how they work. This vacant property becomes a compost, basically, to grow social and cultural initiatives, which can also bring additional value in the later phase of development, perhaps. So, and social temporary use works through a simple idea that accessible space, basically that it's free or very cheap, is creating energy, generating energy to reactivate such vacant places. It's pulling a lot of resources together. So, and the basic model is that users of these spaces are responsible for adapting the space for their needs, to put in their love and hard work that the space is serving their and the community's needs, to have a community governance also in these spaces, because if you don't have so much money as a group of people, for example, renovating vacant space, you have to have a good cooperation, horizontal approach. So it's community governance, which is usually prevalent in these spaces, and that they also invest their time and effort in making it as a cultural and social space. And on the other hand, operator, which is usually necessary as a mediator between the owner and the users. Operator is responsible for agreement, for organizing together with the users this garden service, light renovations and utility management, coordinating the community, finding the maximum potential in activities, in cooperations possible between the people that are using the space, which are mostly socially and culturally motivated, as I mentioned, and also supporting these initiatives together. And that is also exemplified, this social temporary use exemplified by an aspect or attribute that it is usually concentrating a lot of similarly minded people who are looking for social impact, who are motivated by social impact, not so much as a financial impact. They want to be, of course, stay sustainable, but they do to put their energy in what is giving them maybe satisfaction and learning and cultural and social outcomes, not only money. And so together, this model creates generative spaces by putting together social impact-oriented people with spaces that are vacant and are interesting for these people. The more, let's say, creative people are seeing, as I also mentioned, opportunities and interesting aspects of the space where maybe reasonable business person or citizen wouldn't see it, because these are like open fields of imagination. Vacancy is serves as an incubator, basically, for new types of ideas. And that is together creating temporary urban commons. And to define urban commons is basically a way how people put together their effort to create a common resource. So space can be a resource, and also people's assets can become resource, like tools that they have, time that they have. And in this way, vacancy can turn from unused liquid space into generative space, and many cities are using this this approach in their policy and recognizing this as a valuable asset, cultural and social capital, to revitalize and to make their cities more adaptive, and especially in times of crisis. This is apart from being accessible space for social and cultural activities and pooling these activities together, basically being an incubator. Social temporary use is also serving as a tool for cities to bring abandoned territories to life. This is one example, Riga, one of our early pilot projects, where abandoned courtyard became a very lively activity space in the whole neighborhood, which is kind of stigmatized as a place. it's making possible to create new public spaces and make places and increase the value of the space and its attractiveness. For example, this is another quarter that actually I'm now currently located in, and 2017 it looked this, and then 2020 summer it started looking like this, and basically some artists and social NGOs working here took inspiration from one campaign of Animal Liberation Organization, which is working there as a temporary user, and made together this very emblematic statue, which became now during the crisis times one of most favorite photo objects in Riga, a vitamin for people to go somewhere in the crisis time. And besides, this collective from this quarter also worked with social anthropologists and with anthropological research approach, discovered the old name of this whole neighborhood, Lastadia, which is the old name, Dilastadi. Dilastadi was neighborhoods of Hanseatic cities all over the Hanseatic League, towns like Königsberg and Danzig. And so this neighborhood, which was sanitized, also became an interesting location because people can now name it somehow, which is connected with something positive. Then developing social services. This approach is serving for people who have social motivations and who might come up with to serve needs that the current city services or in general nobody is serving these needs. For example, we have developed a few free shops in our locations of Free Riga, and these are the first free in Riga. So this is a new model in Riga since 2018. There was the first one, and it serves also as a free time center for elderly people, seniors, where they themselves become volunteers, which is very wonderful. And developing social services is also an aspect of youth. I wanted to show this example of open bicycle repair shop, which started in the corner you can see just on the field. And this year they are making their stand, the permanent stand for bicycle repair, and once in a week they'll have bicycle repair workshops just to teach people how to repair your bicycle. So in general, we have had as Free Riga, we have worked in 9 locations, meters that we have activated, 10 hectares of land. You can see that we are trying to be a platform and to scale, and to also raise the level of these benefits that we can reach the people with such an approach to space making. Temporary use as an integrative model is serving many stakeholders, and it's in a city development aspect. It's been called the new multi-tool for the city planning, because it's serving so many needs. And so to say, this was definition of social temporary use, but social temporary use initiatives and platforms especially, of course, have been also witnessing the benefits that we can create in the city out of vacancy. Or the time period of temporary use. So we have been invited by some owners to experiment with how to integrate temporary use and its benefits as a planning approach, urban commons based approach for property development, where otherwise the property stands it's not interesting property market. So these are some phases. You can see that the urban commons-based development approach differs by the fact that it is bringing value to the property even the time when typical development would leave it empty. And as this urban commons-based development, it's basically a prototyping approach, and it's as a location and as a placemaking, let's say, eventually when the reconstruction starts. And here's one case study that I wanted to show, the same space that I showed earlier, which started working in late 2017, basically 2018, which we had tried to negotiate with the city council in the early times of Free Riga, 2013, when it was still city-owned space, and we had brought in some workshops there. This is expert from Berlin, working through temporary use as a urban activation tool since many years, from Studio Urban Catalyst. Maybe some of you know it. It's one of the reference, let's say, stakeholders in temporary use as an activation tool, Urban Catalyst from Berlin. And it resulted in nothing in 2013. However, we agreed after this territory had been sold to a private owner, we agreed with the private owner to reactivate it. So it was a story in between with a good end, at least in between. We got a chance to work on this space. And as you see here, the space looks already different. It's 2019. And it became most intensely used creative quarter in Riga, as this particular project we had also focused to make it a creative quarter, so that the users that we attract can stay there even if it's commercialized in the end. So to unite the urban commons with economical sustainability of this place as a later creative successful creative quarter. And it became one of the hotspots for art and urban art and street art in Riga. And that's just in 2 years, basically. In the second summer it was operational, it was already full and having like 1,000 to 2,000 people at the same time in the quarter in nice summer evenings. Here is, you can see it from the top. We had very multifunctional use of the spaces. We had both art spaces, co-working spaces, concert halls, street food, some bars, artist studio, and other types of spaces. This is also exemplary of temporary use as such, multifunctional use. And as for the social impact, I mentioned that this became the most used, intensely used creative quarter in Riga in just 2 scenes. And as for the investment side of it, showcasing that social temporary use can also bring in a lot of resources from users, in this case from us as a social temporary use operator. It brought in nearly 200,000 euros in 2 years in investment, which made the space. I have 2 or 3 minutes more.
Well, a minute.
Okay. So it was, and another quarter also. In another example, we also brought in quite much investment through the fact that people wanted to create this as a social space. So it's working as an investment, alternative investment type. And for this approach, there are some advantages over the traditional financial return-based approach, like that it can reanimate spaces which are not attractive in the current economical situation. It is basically as a prototyping approach, and so it's more successful. You can more precisely invest money when you already know what is working in the space. And so also bringing in community resources in the space and making it instantly attractive. And in that way, it has less risk for the further investment. But there is one problem with this approach, that in normal temporary use situation, temporary use is in the end crowded out by the commercialized use, which is not preserving the benefits out of the temporary use, like these urban commons created here. As you can see, culture has been shifted. So, and this is a challenge which unites very many social temporary use organizations in Europe. And there are a lot of projects also, Refuel project, the previous URBACT project where Riga participated, another interesting project, T-Factor, that are looking at temporary use as a new way to create cities and to make them more in line with the idea of urban commons, where also citizen resources are given space on a permanent basis. So these organizations have grown in capacity, and basically what we are working now with colleagues from Brussels, especially Comuna, on a new network called the Gentrify Europe, which would add to this idea of social impact-oriented people and vacant spaces, basically funds, raising capital from social banks or from state and municipality as a partner to make these urban commons and these nice effects, which make city more generating into permanent state of the situation. And so, yeah, this is basically the main idea that I wanted to tell you. State and perhaps community land trust and social bank as a partners to extend this approach and to have it more permanent in that people can themselves create more resilient and accessible city. Thank you.
Marcis, thank you very much. You can see Marcis would like to tell you much more, so please join him at the Meet the City table.